Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 286. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of You Know. Also on this episode, we're joined by longtime friend of the show, Freddie E. Williams II, as he comes on to join us to talk about Captain Atom, the genesis of how his work came about on Captain Atom, and also we really talk in depth about issue number 3 and some of the themes that are surrounding this series that are going to be ongoing. And as always, I want to thank you for your patience on this episode. I was installing a software package on my computer from work, and because there was a conflict between something else that was on my computer, I had trouble getting the show together this week. I finally resolved the issue, and everything's running great now, and I won't have the problem again. But it was one of those frustrating few days. I was trying to get the episode out to you guys, but I also didn't want to risk losing anything. So it was kind of a fun little process there. But I hope you guys enjoy this episode. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, Captain Atom number 6, Freddie E. Williams II, is joining us, and he is one of the co-creators on this particular book. A great danger has been lurking in the shadows while Captain Atom continues his crusade to help those in need. Now the time has come for him to face a threat unlike any other, yet strangely similar to himself. Discover the secret connection between Captain Atom and this unholy beast, and brace yourself for an ending you'll never see coming. $2.99 regularly, 40% off, only $179. And if you're doing that 50% off deal from DCBService.com, where you're getting the entire line of the New 52, this will be in that as well. So if you're not supporting Captain Atom, give this book a shot. It's a terrific book, as you'll hear about on this episode. Over at InStockTrades.com, Robin the Big Leagues trade paperback. This collects Robin number 163 to 167. Robin goes solo to battle a group of villains who take an entire hospital ward hostage. The only problem is that the gang is led by his former friend Dodge. Can Tim save the day and turn his friend from the dark side? Artist on this is Freddie E. Williams II. It's 128 pages, $12.99 regularly, 42% off, only $7.53. If you have not picked up the Robin work by Freddie E. Williams II, Brandon Thomas was writing on this and Adam Beechin, I highly recommend it. Just a terrific run. I loved his take on Robin. Also, though, if you go through, you can find books from his Flash run. You can find books from JSA All-Stars. It's a great opportunity to pick up on some of Freddie Williams II. Wonderful artwork if you haven't, and just a terrific creator. So thank you, InStockTrades.com, for continuing to support the show. And remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler show. We go in-depth in the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on the show. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
So, who's got a camera? Ooh, get one of me and the kid first. Then you and me, then the three of us, and then one with the crowbar. Then...
Joining us for this segment on Captain Atom issue number 3 is longtime friend of the show, Freddie E. Williams II. And Freddie, welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. It's good to talk to you guys again.
Freddie, I want to jump right into it. How did Captain Atom come about? Because with us as fans, the New 52 hit, and it was something where we'd heard the buzz about it initially. Flashpoint was going to be this big, huge event that was going to change the universe. But we really didn't know what that was going to look like. How was it for you as a creator? Like, how did your involvement with Captain Atom come about?
Well, you said it was new, like, this whole new world, and that was very much how it struck me, or how I was introduced to it as well, like taking a step back from Captain Atom but leading in that direction. I had done the map of the world of Flashpoint, and I don't know if you guys remember that. It was printed and, it was shown online, and then it was printed in a couple of different comics and stuff where it showed, like, the, in quotes, current DC Universe world map or whatever, where, like, part of Europe had been obliterated and stuff, and all the different controlled territories. And that was actually my first inkling that something big was on the horizon for DC that was world scope changing. So from my perspective, I had gotten I think I can say this now, I had gotten a non-disclosure agreement from DC that said, like most non-disclosure agreements, you can't say anything that we're going to talk about, blah, blah, blah. This was before the world map, and to be honest, I just assumed that it was going to be a 5-part mini-series event on some book, or it'd be a part of the next event book, like after Brightest Day, then there would be World War DC, something like that is what I pictured in my mind, but that was no prompting from DC. That was just what I assumed. And so after that, DC had approached me about, this was when JSA All-Stars was finishing. As I was working on issues 17 and 18, Mike Carlin, who was my editor, he sent me this cryptic email that he needed to talk to me about the future of the book and, like, his standing at DC. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? I even replied back, ooh, that sounds really ominous. And he called me within the next couple of days, and he said that he was moving from the East Coast offices to the West Coast offices, and that he wasn't sure what I was going to be working on next, but they had something in mind for me. Well, as I have an exclusive contract with DC, which guarantees me a certain amount of work per year, and there's about a bunch of other stuff in there. But I had no concept. Basically, that this was the most closed lip that I'd ever experienced any communications with DC, is what I'm getting at. But I honestly just thought it was because of all of the changes that was happening at DC. I didn't think that they had something as big as the New 52 on the horizon. I mean, who would assume that? It was, shortly after that, I got approached by DC to do either Captain Atom or a different book, and Captain Atom sounded like you could do the most crazy stuff in it, like comparatively. But it wasn't until we were into, like JT and I were into definitely into issue 1, maybe even the beginning of issue 2 or something. We obviously knew that it was under non-disclosure and we couldn't talk to anybody about it, but we didn't know that it was a part of the new DC 52. So what I'm saying is that, pretty sure this is the same thing with JT. We were constructing Captain Atom without the knowledge that the whole universe was about to be relaunched or whatever. So when I found out about that, although, I knew something big was happening with the map and stuff, it was just like I just thought they were redoing Captain Atom. Maybe I'm just oblivious or whatever, but I didn't know what the non-disclosure agreement was about. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was like these 3 pieces of information that I felt were almost non-connected. And when I found out it was a part of this much bigger event, that was really exciting. I felt like, oh, sweet, I'm a part of the head of the spear, that's like, cutting through, this sounds really like it's maybe intentionally or unintentionally majestic, cutting through the future of the DC universe. I'm about to be a part of a launch that's relaunching the universe or something. Anyway, that was me, JT Kroll, and then Rachel Gluckstern, the editor. We had one conversation that was about 2 hours long or so, and then in that conversation, me and JT already had just some initial ideas, just kind of off the cuff sort of stuff that we had maybe a day or so to think of. And then the next day, JT and I spoke for probably half the day on the phone, just talking about themes we wanted to address and how difficult it'll be to write such a powerful character. But on a side note, even though I signed the non-disclosure agreement, and I know that NDAs, you can't talk about whatever thing you're working on, I then got a phone call from one of the DC legal guys who even said, not only do we want you to not talk about the project, we don't even want you to say you signed a non-disclosure agreement, because they didn't want other creators that were not involved in the project, in the launch, they didn't want them to feel excluded, negativity for not being included in the launch. So there, because there were guys who were still finishing up the regular DC universe or was working on other titles that had nothing to do with the New 52. So that it was like an NDA about the NDA. You know what I mean? A non-disclosure about the non-disclosure. So it was very hush-hush, and to be a part of it was and is exciting and makes me feel great that I'm a part of the DC family, so to speak. So
kind of makes you feel like you're a spy or something cool like that.
Maybe not as cool as a spy, but if I was, I couldn't own up to that. It would be, how cool it is to be a spy, because I would have to play it off. Well, I couldn't admit that, as a spy.
Yeah, if you told me, then you'd have to kill me. So I understand.
And there is that, yeah.
Should I be uncomfortable with just how comfortable and easygoing with his laugh and the thought of killing me made Freddie feel?
you guys should try this when you have the next opportunity. Try to do a full volume evil laugh at some point, your next opportunity, like, you mess up something and your wife, it almost looks intentional, but it wasn't. Just try to do that, like kind of where you take that wide stance with your legs and you start with your torso kind of bent over a little bit and then start laughing as loud as you can in the most villainous way that you can. It actually feels really, it feels really good to do that. So I don't know if that means I'm being turned to the dark side or if it just means it's just a hilarious thing that nobody ever sees anyone do because it's unrealistic, but it's still fun to do. Like, I've done it in front of my wife, and she was like, "You're such a dork." Like, put your arms over your head when you're laughing. It's really fun.
I have this idea of, like, people growing out long mustaches and twisting them and doing these laughs for therapy.
Yeah, it's funny. It's probably therapeutic because it's related to, like, I hadn't thought of it, like, but it's probably somehow related to, because I'm usually a pretty soft-spoken guy. I don't lose my temper very easily, and it would be like if you went to a therapy session and the therapist asked you to yell, to scream. It's like it does something, like it probably gives you an endorphin rush or something like that. So maybe that's what I had to do with. I don't know.
Actually, I guess laughter does release endorphins. Because there was this whole laughter therapy where you literally go into the session and you're like, ha, ha, and you laugh out loud and you spend like 10, 15 minutes just straight laughing.
Awesome.
It didn't help me any.
One of the things that was interesting to me when you were talking about your experience with Captain Atom and what you didn't know, I'm actually curious now what you did know as far as, like, how was this presented to you? Did you know that it was like a reboot or a relaunch? Because this is a character, one of the things I'm enjoying as a reader. I mentioned to you before we started recording, Captain Atom's one of those characters. I knew Captain Atom from crossovers and team-ups and stuff like that, but I've never read solo Captain Atom other than there was a Wildstorm miniseries at Armageddon where he was the main character. But I hadn't really read him, maybe an issue or two here or there where there was a crossover, but I didn't follow him. So for me, it was really great to have a ground floor experience with Captain Atom. I know while we're seeing him in a new way, it is getting to the roots and the core of the Captain Atom concept, and I'm really enjoying seeing him modernized for today. His experience to today's world, to today's DC, how much of that did you know going in? I know you didn't know how the scope and scale of what they were doing, but, like, did you know that you were going this route with it and actually this much of a reboot with the character?
Yeah, I mean, and to vibe on what you just said about, not knowing very much about Captain Atom, I was very much in the same boat. I knew of Captain Atom from the Kingdom Come series where he was the one split open, the Parasite, a creature, a villain named the Parasite, had split open his metal skin and causing what meant, basically a nuclear explosion in the heart of Kansas, and that's one of the things that made Superman come out of retirement. Like, that's what I knew about Captain Atom, basically. That's the core of it. I've seen him on Justice League Unlimited and saw him in some issues like of Armageddon or whatever it was with Wildstorm. I saw him like interacting with Mr. Majestic from the Wildstorm universe. And then I knew that he was used as the basis of Dr. Manhattan, and that he was a Charleston character. So I had like these little bits and pieces or something of what Captain Atom was. And I like the premise of him, but to be honest, and this is no slight, because I had not read any miniseries or storylines with Captain Atom. To be honest, I felt that he was too much of a I fly around and shoot energy beams type guy. He seemed rather generic. It just sounded like Captain Atom is a cool name. Maybe we make him a captain in the military, and his name would be Adam, A-D-A-M, and then it becomes A-T-O-M. It's kind of clever, and then that's the character. I honestly, that's no offense to anyone who really liked Captain Atom or followed, because Steve Ditko is the one who created him back in the Charleston days. That's no slight against him. I'm just telling you my initial preconceived notions, I guess, of the character. But Rachel, my editor at DC, told us that they wanted to go as, I didn't say the words crazy, but like to basically not to be hindered by his previous continuity. And JT and I were like, okay, great, we'll go crazy with him. And that it would be okay if we went to like a God type, God level, little g, God level with this character. And so that was kind of the direction or our origin point. And then some of the ideas that JT and I had in the initial couple conversations, or what, spawned stuff, it was like, I remember a long time ago, Denny O'Neil, he had mentioned that it was easier for him to write and edit Batman than it was for him to write Superman or God-level characters. I remember him saying that, and then when we started getting into Captain Atom, I understood where he was coming from with that, because until then, the struggle of a character is kind of what you want to tell a story about, and it's hard to give a guy like that a struggle, and you don't want to play the game where every week he runs into some metaphorical kryptonite where it always nerfs him at every issue just so that you can give him a struggle or something. So we had the second arc planned out even before I started working. We had the first and second arcs planned before I even started on issue 1, and currently we have the second arc and most of the third arc already planned and I'm just finishing issue 6 today and tomorrow. It's imperative with a character like this to plan way far ahead, because you don't want to do that thing where you're flying by the seat of your pants and always giving a cliffhanger. You can't in my opinion, you can't get away with that on a character like this.
Yeah, it's funny because you're talking about just the godlike, powers that Captain has, and I've enjoyed seeing him do that, and I've enjoyed seeing him really flex the muscle, but some of those personal interactions that he's having, those human moments that he's having in the lab, and just between the different scientists, between him and Renita, those emotional moments were something that really, kind of pulled me in, because it's that connection that I have to this superpowered creature. It's like I always say with Lois and with Jimmy, when it's the Superman stories, those are the best tie-ins for me, and that's something that it's story but also artwork. I'm really, really digging the dramatic differences that we see in Captain Atom and see in the people. That really just brings it home for me.
Awesome. It's an important thing for him to have those humanizing elements to a story, because if not, the concepts become so out of touch with what we as humans experience that they lose all frame of reference. It's like if you saw a picture of an apple, like a photo of an apple, and somebody said, "Look how huge this apple is," and it's just sitting on a table, you have no frame of reference of anything next to it, you're like, it just looks like an apple. But then they go, "Oh, well, look at this other photo," and then they flip to the next one on their iPad, and like next to it is a salt shaker in this one, and the salt shaker's, like 1/16 of the height of this apple. You'd be like, "Oh, geez, that's a huge apple." It gives you some frame of reference. It gives you scope. It's one of the reasons that crime scene investigators would put those ruler mark hashtags next to a piece of evidence before they take photo, just to give them scale and that sort of thing. You have to have something to compare it to that people can identify with, because if not, it becomes a, in quotes, drama about concepts, like subatomic particles. If you just look at if you had like 10 subatomic particles, then one blips out of existence, then one comes back, most people are like, I don't care about that. That has nothing to do with my life. Then you have to put it in like metaphors that they understand. So if instead you said, to contextualize this event, the fact that subatomic particle bleeped out of existence, that could mean a complete redefinition of our paradigm of understanding what matter is. And that's still a little high concept. So then you say, it's possible those things could be, it exists one moment and then ceases to exist. It's not turning into a large burst of energy like a nuclear reactor. We don't know where that subatomic particle is going. Those are very impressive things if you have some background to lead up to those things to understand it. You know what I mean? It would be like if nobody had played bowling before, and I'm actually using a metaphor here to try to make other people understand it. If nobody had played bowling before and they overheard someone bragging that they had a 300 in their bowling score, like the one who's never played bowling or has never bowled, they would be completely unimpressed. They would have no idea what that means. And then everyone around it would say, no, you don't understand. That means you had a perfect game. Oh, okay, I kind of understand that,
That leads into one of the things that I really like about what you guys are doing with Captain Atom, though, and where I'm connecting with the character. I know you're a Superman fan, and one of the things that I think you understand, like your favorite Superman stories and how you connect with that character of Superman, and I think that does apply to a lot of Captain Atom. But what I like about him is we've got this guy with godlike powers, but he's still limited by, and in how he approaches it, by what he knows, his knowledge. When it comes to working inside the head of a boy who has got cancer, he's limited by what he knows, the knowledge base that he has. He doesn't just instantly know everything. He has the ability to do great, amazing things, but what can my imagination go to? What knowledge base do I have from high school, from my past, from experiences in life? And those are the only things I can pull from. So I really have enjoyed connecting with him that way. And there's a vulnerability to that in seeing him kind of reach into his head and try to think through the process. It's not just a bam, I know it. And I like that about him a lot.
That's one of the reasons that we're able to tell a story about him that can be related, that people can understand or hopefully get invested in emotionally and stuff. I mean, you hit it right on the head. It's some of the concepts that I've had in my mind for Superman since I was a kid actually fit much more naturally with Captain Atom. Had many story ideas planned out. Like, when I say story ideas, I don't mean like really detailed subplots laid out, but like a bunch of jotted down ideas for the last several years in my mind about a Superman story that would happen in the future, and all these things would have had to have changed kind of in the status quo of the character to make those applicable. But actually those are automatically applicable to Captain Atom. So some of the same, I have cannibalized some of those ideas, and then just some of the emotional vibes I've applied to Captain Atom.
One of the things that I like that DC did over the summer is, and I always enjoy when they do this, I wish they do it to every possible convention that they could, is when they podcast the panels. It's really great to be able to hear you guys and your commentary when you're there. And with Captain Atom, you were talking about the art direction of Captain Atom and what you were doing with the character of Captain Atom. And I was really excited to see. I always enjoy your art. We became big fans of yours with your run on Robin. And then, continuing on from your run on Robin, the Flash, when you take on the Flash, I love that you tweak your art and the style of your art to the character. I love watching your growth on a series when you're working on it, because, it's clear you think about ahead of time, okay, how do I want to approach this series? And as you're going through, you're kind of evaluating yourself and the storytelling you want to do with the character, and you keep tweaking. We saw that a lot in the Flash. I saw a lot of growth there. And then it was great in JSA All-Stars, and I picked up the trade of JSA All-Stars because you mentioned that you had done some tweaks on the trade, and that was really cool to be able to see that. But I really enjoy your art because of every book has a Freddie feel, but then there's also that kind of newness, the freshness of what is he going to do with this. Captain Atom, I really loved the first issue, and it was a surprise for me because I walked in focusing on Captain Atom and looking at all the cool things you were doing with him. But what I noticed then is you realized that you had to, it wasn't just Captain Atom. If I'm doing these things with Captain Atom, the way that I craft his world and his environment, artistically, I have to, how am I going to approach that? And I was really enjoying the backgrounds, supporting cast, everything you were doing with them, because I'm like, wow, I see everything that I love about Freddie's art, but then I'm also seeing like this environment that's really been crafted around this design of this character. And I guess I was so expecting to be just wowed by Captain Atom. And I don't mean that in a negative way at all. It was more of a, you had me so excited with your saying, I'm doing this ink wash thing with Captain Atom and all that. And I was really glued to that and riveted. When I was reading the book, I was like, oh my gosh, look at all the cool stuff he did and the backgrounds and on the characters and things like that. I guess I was expecting my focus to be totally in one area, and it was really a nice surprise. How did you approach this book artistically? Like, what was that like for you to kind of take a look at this and come up with a design, not just for the character, but also everything around him?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I was very nervous about making the change and stuff. So I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and even the less than positive has still been pretty positive. So in other words, it's been almost all above board, positive about the change in the art direction and stuff. So I really appreciate that. Basically, it came from, it was very organic, and it was several different avenues that coalesced at the same time. So one avenue was that we were talking about emotionally, we wanted Captain Atom to feel like a different type of entity, like isolated, but isolated sometimes in my mind brings about ideas of like a brooding youngster, and that's not necessarily what we wanted to feel. We just wanted him to feel alien for lack of a better term. He's not an alien, but he's alien in the sense that he doesn't really belong. That was one avenue. So that was the emotional avenue. And then the artistic avenue was about, I do a lot of convention sketches, and I try out a lot of, sometimes whenever you're at a convention and you are drawing Batman for like the 15th time, you start to want to experiment with a new way of doing that. And so I have experimented since probably 2004 or 5 or whatever it was on doing different, not just the typical pen and ink sort of look. Like I've tried to use different tools. I've used my fingers to where I'm dipping my fingers in ink and kind of finger painting in a way, because it gives like just a different technique. It gives a different feel other than just a regular brush marker or something. I've used Q-tips and I've dipped tissues or just whatever I had lying around, either tissues or paper towels or pieces of scratch paper into the inkwell, and just kind of went crazy on the paper to see what it would do. And then you kind of work with it. You're like, oh, okay, cool. That kind of looks like a cool rock texture and stuff. So those are like organic things that I'm assuming every artist does, but I had no guidance in those things because I don't have a studio or anything. I didn't go to art school or anything. So I'm just saying these were organic developments of my own. Part of those, sometimes on a commission, like if I'm doing 2 Batman, I'm using Batman just because he's the most visually versatile and I get a lot of commission requests for him. If I'm doing 2 Batman commissions back to back, one might be super heavy blacks and look very brush. I might just use a lot of wet brush, sort of heavy inks. And then the other one, I'll use pretty good, amount of shadows, but then I'll add some gray wash to it to have some more subtle tones. And then maybe if I'm doing another commission of Batman, I'll have like a lot of cross-hatching and stuff. It just depends on what struck me as something cool to do at the time. And one might have lots of ink spatter, and then the other one will be really clean and crisp or something, just, depending on whatever, the mood or something. So it was stuff like that. It was like, that was the other avenue. And so I wanted to, it struck me that I could just apply different artistic styles to both, to him, to Captain Atom, and then also to the background stuff. And then that continued to evolve into, that also provided us an interesting way with what the villain could be, or other, end quote, special things. If something else was, basically it would be like we would use gray wash to be an arrow to the audience, like this thing is different, or this thing is unique, or this thing emanates energy as well, even if it's not exactly Captain Atom energy. I was mercilessly nervous about how to do this, or if I could do this, or what DC would think that I was doing this, because they're not privy necessarily to all my commissions and con sketches or whatever. So I emailed Rachel and said, hey, what do you think about this idea? And I wrote it out for her, but that's kind of a hard thing to visualize. That could mean anything, or what if I'm terrible at doing spot blacks for the, real shadowy backgrounds and stuff. Just from the text, Rachel was like, hey, that sounds really cool. And I like how and this is what she put, I like how you adjust your style for every project that you work on. That's great. And I was like, and she didn't request it, but I did a proof of concept, like a render test, where I drew what was at the time the design for Captain Atom. His design changed a little bit after this, but I drew him flying over a city, and then so I had the city background that was all really heavy blacks, and then Captain Atom and gray wash. And I emailed that to her, and she flipped out. And then she, a part of just the development of the DC-52, she added it to. They had DC had some sort of corkboard. I wasn't there for this, but they had some sort of corkboard or presentation room that had a big board in it or something where they were putting all the new character designs up there and stuff. And I was about halfway through issue 1, or no, I'd roughed out all of issue 1 or done wireframes or something, I can't remember, but I know I was in production of it. And she dropped me an email, a very nice one, that had excerpts from some comments that Jim Lee had made, that he thought it was a great idea. And on different occasions when editors would walk into the room, there's this big corkboard of, ideas and development stuff, but that almost all of them went to the Captain Atom one and was like, that's really cool. So stuff like that. I'm always a little skeptical or a little suspicious that, is Rachel just saying that to make me feel good, or is she telling me that because it's the truth? And it seems like it's been the truth. So anyway, that's just basically how it kind of came about. It was just an idea that organically grew from trying to make him look isolated. And since I had been experimenting with these other art styles, then coalesced into that, that concept. Talking about different art styles and stuff that I've done, that to me, I see them as changing art styles from book to book or whatever. I see them very much as like, it's the same style to me. It's just a different, the book is like a lens that you put on, like a pair of glasses. Each book has a different vision or a different way that I want to present the visuals. So it's hard to describe, but it's almost like if you took a 3D model, I guess Arkham City would actually be a good example. How that there are different skin treatments for some of the characters or whatever that you can, basically it's the same 3D model, but you apply a different skin to it. Oftentimes, the style that I'm doing, the style change is more of a rendering sort of change. Sometimes there's structural stuff too, but it's like a different filter applied to the same sensibilities, I guess. Sometimes whenever you're dealing with what style is, there's a discussion about style being everything from the structure of how you draw the page and the characters all the way through to how you frame your shadows and do your rendering and that sort of thing. So to me, the storytelling sensibilities still pretty much stay the same, although of course hopefully I get better along the way. But it's the way that I'm rendering and lighting, in quotes, lighting the scenes that is the difference in Captain Atom, especially the background stuff.
When I read the comic, I first read it through, then I do the second read-through, which is really just my art read-through. I'm not reading the words, I'm just looking at the pictures, and I'm enjoying just the artwork behind it. And it's gotten me so I can actually better appreciate, pencil or inks, and the colorists and the whole full part of the creative process. And I was laughing, kind of chuckling at myself, thinking of your colorist. And just the amount of, I don't know what kind of, I don't know the guy, so I don't know if he really loves going into all those different details and all the different color splash pages that you guys are doing, or if he's just sitting there at his desk going, that idiot, cursing your name for it. Because you guys are just firing on all cylinders on my book. This is just an absolutely beautiful book.
Thank you. On a side note, I do my passes through comics in the opposite order. I go through as the art read through, where I just look at the art and storytelling without reading anything, and then I go back through and reread stuff. Actually read the book or whatever. But so it's a similar thing, but different for me.
When you were talking about this, I actually flipped to issue 3, and that the page where it's got the title splash of Divine Intervention, and you see Captain Atom looking over the Earth, and I was looking at that while you were talking about your initial design for the character and all that. One of the things, and I want to talk about the introduction to that book, everything that led up to that sequence, but I'm going there now because the shot of him looking down on the Earth, for me, was breathtaking. We talk a lot on the show about it's not always such a great thing to be a hero. As kids growing up, we kind of looked at all of the good things of being a superhero and having powers, and you didn't think about the negative side, of everything, the isolation and things that are being explored, like, for example, in Captain Atom. I like the duality of this book, though. This is the type of thing I remember from the live-action movies, that I grew up with a kid seeing. You'd see these people doing this and looking down on Earth, and just how cool and calm and breathtaking, peaceful this would be. Like, this is, like, it's his opportunity, really, to get away from all of that stuff that we've seen him go through in the first couple issues, and the things that we haven't seen that this poor guy has gone through in his life. And it's one of the things that I really enjoyed in that sequence. There was so much more to it than just him being out there flying. And I think that's really a sign of what I'm liking with every issue as I'm getting to know him. What's really drawing me to the character is I'm thinking beyond the page with him. This is a book that I really think about a lot when I'm done reading it. I'll go back and page through issues and look over sequences again just because I'd been thinking about the book. I will say every issue that's come out, and this has been with 1, 2, and 3, I've gone back and looked through the previous issue every single time. Not because I forgot anything that happened, just because there was something in the new issue that sparked me and made me want to look back and see something, because I'm seeing it differently now because I know more about the character. And I'm getting to know this guy in a way that I'm really enjoying. But this sequence to me was just kind of I'm like, wow, for everything he's gone through in that one moment, And if you had asked me with issue 1, I would have been like, I don't want to be Captain Atom. Look at what this poor guy's going through, all the isolation, everything. I'm like, oh my gosh, they sold me on the fact that I want to be this guy. Even with everything I know, I'm looking at that moment. And in that moment, I'm like, I envy him. I envy that he can be up there and he can have that, because that's something we'll never be able to experience. And that's what it means to be a fan of superheroes, to be able to see those moments with these characters, to be in awe and go, wow, I would love to be able to do that.
It's cool that you had that reaction, because I think I have a pretty good grip on what Captain Atom is going through. I wouldn't want the responsibility that he has, personally, or what potentially my conscience would make me feel like I had, the responsibility that I would have, that I would bestow upon myself just by having that power. I mean, he could potentially have that power and just not do anything with it, but it would be like a real waste. And I'm glad that you're rereading that stuff. And oftentimes whenever I'm like, because I've been on Raging Bullets a whole bunch of times, and usually I don't necessarily try to pimp out whatever I'm working on. I mean, just by the nature of talking about it, maybe people would like to see it, and that's cool. With Captain Atom being a pretty unknown character, he's been around for a long time, but basically he's unknown and he's not on a lot of people's radars. This is the only book so far that I feel like I need to and I want to encourage people to pick up. And if you wait to the trade, that's cool too, because that's usually what I do with my collections and stuff. But I think that, and it's because JT and I have put a lot of work into, this book is very personal to us. It's the most work. JT said it, and then I agree that, this feels very much like a creator-owned book, because almost every single idea that we've had, DC has been like, cool, go for it, sounds great, let's do it. And that's not often the case. Usually there's a lot more kind of hand-holding coming from editors or the editor-in-chief or something. And there's nothing wrong with that normally, but I'm just saying that I would encourage people to take a look at the book if they haven't picked it up yet, because it has a lot of layers. I guess if you just want to flip through the comic book when you're sitting at a stoplight and that's the amount of attention span you have for it, maybe you won't get all the levels of it. But hopefully you could appreciate it on a quick read-through, but we've put a lot of thought into what the story arcs will be. And when you reread it, I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like there's a lot to appreciate there if you really want to get a lot out of the comic. There's multiple layers to understand and appreciate or something. And maybe not all of them are apparent right now, but doing what you did, which is read the most recent issue and then go back through the previous ones, that's probably the best way to get all of those levels to start to understand them. So I hope that people have the chance to look through it. And it's not even about the money stuff for me. It's about, because I don't get a ton of money in royalties, it's just about that we've put a lot of work into the book, and I think it's the type of book that I would want to read if I was buying it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm enjoying it on that level, not just as the creator or something. So
I want to talk about issue 3, because I think it's really, for people who maybe haven't been reading the book, I think it's really important to kind of paint a picture of what it's like to read an issue of Captain Atom if they're not. And obviously for fans who are reading it, it'd be great to talk about, because I love doing that on the show. It's one of to me, it's the purpose of Raging Bullets. It's to talk about what are we digging about the book and what's drawing us into the book, and what questions come after we have those conversations. To me, when you were talking about like looking back at the previous issues, and one of the reasons why I do that, when you look at issue 3, if you're not thinking about what happened to Mikey last issue and the revelation that Captain Atom came through, with like, wow, look what I could do. I got in the face of death and I smacked it. I mean, this is a guy in this issue now. We're not dropping a beat. He's coming off of that moment. This is a kid who had cancer, and Captain Atom was defiant of it. He got in there, and we talked about the fact that, the guy doesn't know everything. He's going off of his knowledge. None of us know everything. This is a guy who hasn't instantly gained this like amazing knowledge or anything like that. He has a power that he can use as long as he's able to think of it and utilize it and find a way to constructively make these things happen. I really like that about him, because he was defiant and saved this kid's life. So now he's going through We see him in Seattle preventing this guy who's talking about changing his band name to Skin Graft from needing a skin graft. Moments like that I really love because I'm enjoying these characters that we're reading in this particular issue. We see him then go to Atlanta, and there's this mom who after this experience is trying to lift heavy things at home. I love the kid with the Superman shirt on because knowing we've had you on the show before and you've talked about your love for the character, I'm like, Freddie's like, I get a chance to get a Superman shirt in there. Which, again, shows the larger world. Kind of cool to see that kid, and we all feel like that kid in that moment. But then it comes into a very philosophical moment. If you have godlike powers, where do you stop? Is there a line? How do you decide what that line is? And these are real things that you have to consider because a lot of superheroes have limits, natural limits where they want to do more and they can't. What happens when you're finding that my limits, at least so far, don't seem to be there? There is no, stop. And what does that mean? But you've got a real man inside there with real life experiences who is facing this and saying, wait, I'm a human. I want my humanity. I want to be connected with that. I have the ability to do all these things that you say, geez, I wish I could do all this. But what morally, ethically, where is my stopping point? Where should it be? Is there a master plan? And I love that line. Is there a master plan, and am I fighting against it? I love that idea, that concept that was introduced there. It's something for me that was immediately engaging. And this is a guy, again, who came off of saving a cancer victim, which he said, look what I just did. And look how it's affected his world right now. I loved how those events in those issues flowed into each other. And that's why I went back, because I was thinking to myself, wow, I want to look back at that event again with what he did with that kid, because it feeds so into this so beautifully.
At the end of issue 2, like, Captain Atom feels, he's walking on cloud 9, that he feels like he feels like he's just reached an epiphany on this is what he needs to do. He needs to make his difference in the lives of each individual person. I almost see like a micromanaged Miracles. He's paying close attention and changing little stuff instead of just global threats or something like that. And that's not an incorrect philosophy to have, but it sets up basically the philosophical question of what you were just asking, of what should be the limit. Because I think that there's a way that once you micromanage too much, you can begin to infringe upon someone's free will. And if there is such a thing as destiny or the master plan or whatever, then you could be fighting against it whether you know it or not. So to me, it's like end of issue 2 and the beginning of issue 3 is a important spot in Captain Atom's character development because it sets up what will transpire through the rest of issue 3 and then continuing on.
Yeah, I tell you, it's funny because as we're talking about just the kind of concept of the off-page thinking, and as the DCU has been going on, it's something I've noticed as the more issues I'm getting into, I'm more getting into the character. I'm thinking off pages. I'm putting myself in those positions. And we talked earlier, Captain Atom's a character I have almost no experience with, and I started understanding him. I started getting what he's coming from, and the evolution that we're seeing in him was something I started experiencing from the first issue onto the second, now onto the third. I'm completely in sync with the guy and where he's thinking and where he's going with this, and that for me is just a statement of the story crafting that I have a character I have no background with, but 3 issues in, I'm into this guy's head. I'm understanding where it's going, and it feels realistic to me. I have a man with godlike powers, and he seems realistic. He seems human, and that is just kudos on story crafting that I just gotta just shout out. And that's one of the things I'm loving about this book.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great testament to JT is a great writer. We are working very collaboratively. Essentially, I'm helping to co-plot the books, and then he's clearly the writer still. But yeah, that's definitely the goal, and I hope that. I'm hoping that makes him approachable, so that he's not so distant from readers' experiences, so distant that he becomes uninteresting.
You know what it is for me? It's a journey, and I feel like I'm going on it with him, which is, I think it's really important. My favorite Superman stories have that as well. When do I really like Superman the most? And it's, what, honestly, let's take that out of these godlike characters. I'm a Batman junkie. And I'm like that with Batman. My favorite Batman stories are where I feel like, I'm the sidekick. I'm okay with that point where like Batman knows more than we do. and you should naturally feel like he does. But I like to feel like I'm maybe Robin. Or at least, I'm riding in the back seat or something like that of the Batmobile. But, when Captain Atom hits Libya, after discussing a lack of need to eat or sleep, this idea that he's no longer a part of this world and more in between is truly interesting to me, because it just got me thinking, like, is this just the powers causing it? Is it the physical change? Is it his perception that's causing this feeling in him? And my feeling is it's all of the above. But I like that I'm like sitting here thinking to myself, I want to know more about him. I want to know more what's driving him. And how he's going to be able to cope and will he be able to cope and compensate with that? Because I like that I feel that this guy's, for all of his lack of quote unquote humanity, there's an intense amount of humanity there that I'm connecting with. Again, that goes back to that duality, which is, again, what I'm really digging about the book. I see A, but then I see tons of B. It's a nice mixture of it with him, because I keep wanting to know, what is the end game going to be for him? And I like that I can constantly feel it's not going to be that simple.
Right. Going back to what you're saying about being like Robin in the back seat or whatever, that's a very comfortable place to be, to basically, I'm just thinking of it almost like a kid's point of view or something, to basically to be along for the ride and to enjoy the experiences as they happen, but not necessarily have the responsibility of calling the shots and that sort of thing. And that shows, with Captain Atom, he has no one he only has his own moral barometer to show him what he should be doing, or that sort of thing. So the humanity, that hopefully is where it connects emotionally, like, got all this power, what should I want to make the best of it, and I don't want to overstep my bounds. And, I think he has there's a lot of rich ground that we can cover. It's very fertile. Hopefully the book's around for 30 plus, issues, like just however long. I say that just because nobody knows. From month to month, sales are erratic and whatever the heck. So I hope that things continue, that we can explore as many concepts as we've thrown out there. Because JT and I have spoken, that first day that we spoke, and we spoke for like half the day, there's been probably 10 or 12 times that we've been on the phone, and we just talk for at least 3 hours with all these different ideas, and something will pop up, and it's like, oh, that'd be so awesome to do, but it's just, we have to get to it in due time. So I hope we have that opportunity.
You talk about the collaboration between the two of you, and it's really apparent on this page, in Libya that I mentioned, because it stood out for me. You see him flying back to Earth, and you get this really nice build that matches the dialogue of what he's going through. As he zooms into this moment, you get that wide shot of the war that's going on there, and the fighters and things like that. But then one of my favorite panels, and it wouldn't matter as much if there wasn't this dramatic build to it, was in the close-up of his eyes and nose, Here I'm Alone, where you get that emotional moment. And I loved the flow of that page. I loved the way the dialogue flowed to that. We're getting a build to the story, but it was him exploring himself, and it really just had a very cinematic build to me. And there was a page that just stood out for so many reasons, but it was really that pop at the end that really means nothing if it didn't flow to it. It's funny how just a close-up of the face means so much more depending on how you get there.
Well, thank you very much. There's a rule in cinema that, you're always trying to get, in your scene, you're always trying to get to a close-up at some point. So, but you always have to have those building shots, like, to establish, then usually like a medium shot, then a two shot, then a close-up, then an extreme close-up. Like, that's it's basically a zoom, but you don't always have to approach it in that order. But if you only did close-ups like some of the image books did back in, the 90s or whatever, if you do close-ups throughout the whole book, they lose their impact. So if you are more sparing with your close-ups, hopefully they have a better impact.
You go right from that really cool page to putting the Flash in the book. And that was, again, another one of those moments for me where you have this really super powerful being right on the same page, right next to the everyday average person. And it had that same kind of that duality artwork that I was so enjoying with Captain Atom, but with another hero. But it was a little bit different because you're not doing the Flash the same as you're doing Captain Atom. The Flash is the Flash. And it was that distinction of, again, that mask the energy and just the Flash doing what the Flash does. And then you just look over at the page and you see like the snarling teeth of one of the Freedom Fighters. And you see Flash pulling the bullets out of the air. Those were just some really cool, moments that, and that's on the page flip. So you flip the page, you're like, whoa, what's this? This is awesome. And it really catches, you have these moments in this book where it catches your attention, makes you go, whoa.
Thanks, yeah, and this was the first, since I drew the Flash several years ago, it's the first opportunity I'd had to draw him again, so it was really cool. Like, the JT wanted Flash to look as casual as possible, like that, he's definitely not running to do these things. He's just kind of in that zone or that hyper time or whatever it is, that using the Speed Force or whatever to go, basically he can look as casual like he's strolling, but it's still incredibly fast to us.
Now, when you do these crossovers, because I know there's been a lot of changes in the costumes and appearance and whatnot, are they really heavy into, okay, you got to make sure you do this, or is it kind of an open-ended, let you guys, do your thing with it? Because this Flash blends beautifully with the Flash in his own book. So it's like, when I look at this guy, I'm not thinking he's somebody different than what I've seen in his own title. And that's something I'm really impressed with your crossovers, any of the crossovers. They seem to really have that good team vibe going.
Oh, thanks, yeah. I think part of that is that Francis Manipul and I don't have, our styles or the structure of our style, because there's a whole long discussion you get into about what style is, but the structure of the figures that we draw and some of our sensibilities, they're not dissimilar from each other, so that's part of it. But, the main thing was just that I was drawing the correct version of the Flash, which actually is a lot harder than you might think. The design lines on his costume seem to vary quite a bit, in between Jim Lee's version of him and Francis Manipul's version of him, and depending on page to page or promotional image to the reference that I had was like from 5 or 6 different sources, some Jim Lee and some Francis. They were kind of all over the place. So anyway, I'm just pointing that out because I had to just figure out what was kind of what I thought was the definitive version of the Flash, and then make sure that that's what I stuck to. So, but yeah, it was just to make sure that I was drawing the correct version of the costume. Obviously, they wouldn't want me to draw the old pre-Flashpoint, pre-New 52 version of him.
Yeah, throw him for a loop. Draw like the Kid Flash version, from the old days.
Yeah, draw the Jay Garrick one. That's actually my favorite. My favorite, Flash is the Hermes helmet, all that stuff. So I like the classic versions of the characters.
One of the things that I loved about the casual walk, you've got a guy like Captain Atom who's talking so much about how alone he feels, how disconnected he feels, and just how he's trying to grasp onto his humanity. Then you got a guy like the Flash who now is walking through intense amounts of gunfire so casually. This is something that Captain Atom would be watching. I mean, yes, he's doing it at super speed, but you're still seeing a guy. Now, I'm assuming Captain Atom probably has the ability to, with his powers, to at least on some level more so than the freedom fighters visualize what's going on in front of him and to like make a connection, just say, whoa, wait a minute, here's somebody maybe who can relate to me. Maybe who can get it. And this is something that I felt this was a great issue for a team-up because there's been so much character development at this point that now we get to see him meet up with somebody where we're like, he can start dealing with some of this, making a connection with somebody. And maybe this, I really liked the team-up because it added to that sense of humanity for him. We got to see a different side of him, like a little bit of hope, a little bit of, wow, maybe this will be okay, in those sequences. Now, in this world that mistrusts heroes a lot more than what we're used to, it's interesting to see that play out because Captain Atom, obviously, with what he's been through in the first couple issues, he needs a PR person.
No, that's totally right on, but that relates to some of his. You're absolutely right that it's like he doesn't think of this himself, but he needs a PR guy to go out and say, although you're not seeing it, Captain Atom's working for you. You know, like he's on your side, guys, because and that's what we see. That was one of the points that I was really pushing for with JT, was that I wanted for there to be, in quotes, converts, where the people that he's touching their lives, a lot of them don't know that he's touching their lives. But I wanted, if there is a way for them to know, or for those where he sees them interact in person, basically from the people he would have saved in issue 1 at the foot of the volcano that that suddenly erupted in the middle of Manhattan or whatever, that they wouldn't just stay angry and mistrustful, that he would start to win their hearts, in other words, and whatever that means would be dependent on the person it would be case-by-case basis, I guess, on what that would mean for them. Some people would just mean that they would talk positively about him, but other people would maybe see him as more than just a superhero, or just at least start to trust him or something. So, yeah, you're right on.
One of the things I like, too, is I liked when, Barry's talking about, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead with this, when Barry was talking about the Justice League and the Justice League's view of him and how they were questioning him, how the Justice League and any interaction that they would have in this world with other heroes and other superpowered, let's say metas, because the meta term was thrown out in this. And there's a distinction as far as, are you a hero, are you a villain, are you a gray area? We don't know. You're a meta. Where do you fall in all that? And that can change. We've seen that happen so many times, where your status might be villain one day, hero another. What does that mean PRR-wise for the Justice League as well? I loved that dynamic being brought into there, where he was talking about, hey, the team's wondering how they should view you. And it really is kind of like saying, what should our connection be with you? And Barry was such an appropriate character to have this meeting with, because the calm and the way he was carrying himself and kind of, being diplomatic in fact-finding. It's the police scientist. He wants to be a comforting person where Captain Atom can maybe open up to him. He can get some real tried-and-true information, get a real flavor for who this guy is, and hopefully get this guy to bring his guard down a little bit and say some things to Barry that he might not say to Batman. He might not say to Superman. He might not say to somebody else. It was a coincidence that they wound up there, but what a great guy for him to meet, because I think the moment that these two had would have been very different with any of the other characters on the team of the Justice League. They wouldn't have reacted the same way Barry did.
There's the moments of trust, and then later in the story, the Flash is like, basically sees that, hey, you're not so bad. And then there's something crazy that happens, and then the Flash is like, what did you just do? And now I'm even, in a different way, I'm more leery of you. You know what I mean? Like, that, to me, is the emotional arc that Flash, it almost comes back full circle, but in a way he's even more unsettled. At least that's my understanding, or my thought. To me, it would be that the Flash he would like go back to the Justice League and say, I met him, Captain Atom, and he did some good stuff, but he's kind of beyond, he wouldn't necessarily say this, but he's kind of beyond my comprehension. I'm still not sure about this guy. You know what I mean? Like, he's kind of operating on a different level here. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of confused about the events that happened. And then he also turned the desert to glass. I'm not, and that was a big thing, and it's not expected, and who knows what happened there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it was another very realistic style and very feel that you have. Barry can't just take him at, and any member of the Justice League couldn't just take him at face value. They are the, to use the expression, like, they are the big police of the meta universe. They are the team that everyone's turning to if there's any problem down the line. They're going to be the ones who are going to have to deal with this problem. And I like the fact that he is not just openly, hey, great, we got another guy, here's an invite to the team. He still has he's got to be a professional skeptic about it. It is part of the deductive skills. It is part of, like, the police background. You can't be completely trusting, but you don't have to assume he's a bad guy and try punching him.
Right.
Freddie, one question I have for you, and actually, this is a perfect time to address it. You were talking earlier about you're signing a non-disclosure, you're given a certain amount of information, you're doing a relaunch of a character. Do they let you know the climate of the overall DC universe? Because one of the things that has changed And it's I was going to say subtle, but it's really not subtle. It's more modern, more today, in the sense that the media and PR. We've talked on the show when you've been on before about how the internet even influences where people will throw out things blogging, hit and run, and how that affects how somebody is viewed, and that can be changed very drastically. In this, we're seeing those influences on Heroes. The Heroes, there was no JSA. The current Justice League was the ground floor team 5 years ago. But even today, right now, heroes are not trusted the way that DC Universe has always been the place where the heroes are kind of the clean and the world trusts them and all that stuff. We've got those same heroes now, but in a world where it's our TMZ world. Did you know that there was going to be that kind of change? Was that something editorial that they let you know, or is that something that just kind of organically the book went to? Because what I like is your book really matches up nicely with a lot of the themes and tones that I'm reading in Justice League right now when they're retelling the origin of the team. There's a nice blending, and I recommend for anybody like reading Justice League, if you didn't pick up issue number 3 of Captain Atom, this is a great chance to see like the Flash from that series and all the things that they're dealing with the public. There's a great connection of seeing that Flash being leery when he's talking to Captain Atom and talking about how the Justice League would be with what they're dealing with in their book. So this is a great book for Justice League readers to check out for that reason. So, I mean, was that something you knew, or is that just like a happy coincidence because of the direction you're taking the character in, is kind of what I'm getting at?
It was kind of a combination of stuff like that. Rachel had said that they wanted the book to feel, I don't know if she used the word modern. Maybe let me see. I can't remember. There was, like, in that 2 hour or whatever conversation that me, Rachel, and JT had, there was the new approach. I know she said that she didn't want a lot of baggage from his previous continuity, and I think she might have said something about making it more modern. I mean, she didn't, like, say, so we would use the internet or, anything like that in the story. But like I said, I didn't know that there was this big relaunch thing until I was into at least halfway through issue 1, maybe even past that. But by the time we were planning that I was working on issue 3, we definitely knew. And JT had spoken to Jeff Johns and to Francis Manipul about our use of the Flash because, we wanted to make sure that there wasn't something, that we weren't crossing any lines, that we wanted to make sure he was in character, in quotes, playing in character, to use a role-playing game term. There was some tonal cross-checks there to make sure, but I think in general we're probably just kind of on more of the same page, which is, to me it's a more realistic idea of how metahumans or whatever would be viewed by the general public. Would be first with some people would be in awe of them, but there would be a lot of distrust. Once you get past the initial cool factor of someone having powers, you would then start to go, well, what's their motivations? That would be what you would talk about at the dinner table and that sort of thing. Like, what is it that they have planned for us? Or what are they trying to do? What's their end goal? And who can stop them or something? Are they lying about this stuff? So anyway, those sort of themes to me seem very apropos for, superheroes. And since we were doing a relaunch and starting from a world that wasn't as populated with those guys, then that, just seems some common story elements.
With all these changes of the physical changes of a lot of these characters, is there anyone that's out there that you're like, man, I hope I get to work with this one. This looks really cool.
Characters?
Yeah, characters. Yeah,
characters. I mean, I'm still a huge fan of Batman and Superman and stuff like that, and I think that their costumes look really cool. I think there was, on a side note, a lot of jumping the gun with hate on Superman's costume online, but what's new? I mean, that's a pretty common thing to happen online, because I think it's a pretty cool costume. I like the classic costume more still, but I mean, then again, it had a 70-year head start, you know what I mean? So I've always been a big fan of Jim Lee's Wildcats, and so, this isn't exactly what you asked, but if given the chance to draw to draw like, because I know Grifter, I wouldn't mind taking a stab at something with Grifter, but I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I really like drawing a variety of stuff, so I'm kind of interested in whatever, with all of it.
Yeah, I would think like the teen books that we got going on right now, because those characters really have a especially Teen Titans, all those characters, they have still the building block of what I'm used to, but there is really cool changes going on with it. And I figured that'd be something if I had artistic talent, if I could actually draw stuff, those would be kind of like the characters I'd like to jump into, because you can just sink your teeth into it.
Yeah, and there's some advantages and disadvantages to drawing team books. So there's, the big advantage is always having something to cut to, to structure your scenes with, and then getting to draw a variety of tones and costumes and, interactions and that sort of thing. So it's a rich visual playground to play in when you're working on a team book, for sure.
I want to, before we jump into like the big happening that obviously you mentioned, I want to talk about Renita, Scott, and Dr. Megala, because they're really important characters to the series for me. Scott not only seems to resent Captain Atom, but is jealous of the attentions it brings from Renita. And then, obviously Dr. Megala's guilt that he's been feeling in this. But yet, I always feel like this guy, sure, he's guilty and all, but there's a real creep factor there, this guy as well, which I really enjoy. What were, like, when you guys had some of your initial discussions, and I'm not asking you to reveal anything coming up or anything that would, detract from where you guys are going from the characters as far as, wow, this is what's going to happen and all that. I'm not asking for that. What were some of the initial discussions when you guys were talking about the supporting cast for this book? Like, what were you going for, or how did you decide on these characters? What led to some of that?
Megala was a character that already existed in Captain Atom's universe. He was a character that existed in continuity for Captain Atom, but he looked nothing like that. I think he was in a wheelchair, but he looked pretty able-bodied. I mean, although I don't think we've named what it is that has crippled Megala. Actually, I don't know if this part is canon, but I mean, when I was growing up, one of my friend's mothers had multiple sclerosis, and to see the deterioration that she went through, especially when I was in fourth grade, I had a very vivid, in other words, what I'm saying is that made a big impression on me visually. And so actually some of that is being funneled into Megala. Whether it's noticeable or not, in issue 2, when we showed a flashback to the origins of how Captain Atom came about, Megala was in a regular wheelchair, although probably motorized, and was not nearly as contorted. So, and when we show, there's some other flashbacks, here and there that I've worked on that been something that's progressive, in other words. So anyway, and Megala is actually one of my favorite guys to draw. We wanted some characters that, in a certain way, balanced out Captain Atom.
In the bit with the showcase of power between Barry and Captain Atom, I really liked seeing that because it felt like a natural feeling out process that you would have between two characters with this godlike power. I'm not saying Barry necessarily views himself as having godlike power, but it's kind of I need to know a little bit about this guy. He needs to know a little bit about me. Barry takes apart this tank in what appears to be no time at all. Then you get Captain Atom where he turns everything into oxygen. I mean, it's kind of like, who won on that one? I think we know. But that was cool. I really liked that sequence of events. But when we get into the big event, because these two have this bonding moment, and you mentioned, that doesn't last. Because unfortunately, Captain Atom realizes that, wait a minute, we're missing the big picture. There's something we're not seeing. So he goes into this sequence and realizes, okay, I'm in this life and death danger situation now where if I don't do something here, we're going to have a major catastrophe. And unfortunately, this poor guy, wrong place, wrong time, right place, wrong time, however you want to view that, he's in a situation where he's doing the right thing. But from the outside, who doesn't know the whole story, which is, I think this so fits a lot of our society nowadays. Rather than get the whole story, we jump to conclusions. And then the unfortunate part is those conclusions that you arrive at there, a lot of times are what wind up being pumped all over our media. So this now, for Captain Atom's PR, this guy did the right thing, but now everyone from the outside is going to be looking at this going, did he just cause what I think he caused?
Right, yeah.
And I love that commentary in this book because I feel it's very real world. It's very now. It's very contemporary. I don't think the character, he's still, it's still the same kind of superheroes that we've all known and love, but they're dealing with issues that we can all relate with and that we see nowadays when we turn on the media. It's part of my frustration. And I love that I'm connecting with him on that level about that, where I'm seeing him go through this. And I'm like, this is really wrong. The guy's doing the right thing. And how much of that can you take? That's something where it added a sympathy to him where I already had it with everything else we'd already discussed that he was going through. I'm already dealing with that, but now you're throwing in, he's dealing with today's media. There was assumptions like the Flash is walking in his first meeting with him. Yes, he says, I'm an open-minded guy, I'm trying to give you a benefit of the doubt and that type of thing. But the only reason why he has to even do all that is because of what he's already been inundated with, because of the view of this guy, because of the volcano incident. And I feel that's the way that you would react. Two heroes, when they would meet, would have to react based on all that nowadays.
I mean, a lot can be said about that even in the sort of real world, our real world, like coverage of politics and debates and spin that not just media, but anybody can put on an event. And with our media being so lightning fast, those are memes that sometimes are hard to they propagate very easily, very quickly. Those first memes, it's easy to get that stuck in people's minds, even if those are the incorrect conclusions to come to.
We're supposed to be watching the clock, aren't we? Because I noticed something with both the volcano and with the incident when he had this big event. When he's absorbing great deals of energy, the clock goes backwards.
Yeah.
And I'm really digging, like, trying to figure out what's going on with this guy. But when I was preparing my notes for this, and I'm sure there's other people that have read this, and I'm not pretending I discovered this first or anything. It's just this is when it clicked for me. So there's probably listeners like, dude, I noticed that with issue 1. I didn't. Really, I was paying attention to the clock, and I knew the clock was important, and I was following it. And it was this issue that it hit me. I'm like, wait a minute, that just went backwards. So then I went back to issue 1. I'm like, that happened with the volcano as well. And I'm not asking you to tell, because I know what I'm bringing up now is something you really probably can't go into much, if at all, and I get that, but it was something just for listeners out there. This book has just got so many cool things happening in it. I love that every time I read something new, I mentioned earlier in the show, and this is an example of it, this made me go back. I'm like, wait a minute. Did that happen when he did the last big volcano thing? And I like that there's things that I'm noticing and discovering as I explore this title. Nowadays people talk about the expense of comics and the expense of everything. One of the pure joys for me about reading comics and the creativity of a lot of the books that are coming out in the New 52 is I'm finding a lot of reasons to go back. Not because I have to, not because I'm forced to or anything like that, because I genuinely am curious and interested, and I'm catching something new, and I feel creatively there's just a lot of creative power and creative activity and energy going on right now, and this is a book that's full of that. With that kind of stuff. I mean, that was something that I just really appreciated. I like the mystery and the build, and like I said, I don't know how much you can really say about any of this, other than I just wanted to note it was something I thought was particularly cool.
Yeah, to me, like that, it's a total like mum's the word on explaining what the numbers are about. Though I recently listened to a podcast with JT where he kind of spilt the beans. Like when I heard it, his podcast had already been recorded and broadcast. There was nothing I could do, but I felt like I was in the room with him, and like I wanted to put my hand over his mouth. Like, what are you doing? I guess I just won't repeat it. But I mean, I'm glad that you noticed that it is important, and it's something that will continue to illustrate other important things.
Yeah, I like the mystery and the unknown and trying to figure it out. It's because exactly the same thing with Sean. It was one of those things that I didn't catch initially. I was looking at the clock and it didn't dawn on me, and then until this current issue, I'm like, wait a minute. Then I literally went through all 3 issues, and I'm like, okay, number, and I was tracing where the number was going, what it was doing, and just I'm really curious about this, and I'm looking forward to the reveal and or just the finding out what it is.
Cool, good. Then it's successful so far.
One of the other themes that's going on in this, because we see that shadowy figure that's following Captain Atom, and the first thing I'm thinking as he's going by, I jump back to the previous issue, and I'm like, is this that shape-shifting thing or whatever that was in there? Or is this somebody different? And I don't I'm not saying I have a firm idea on that, but I love that I'm still thinking about that shapeshifter mystery where you see that dog turn into the two-headed guy, and it seems to be kind of imprinting from, because we don't know the full story of that thing yet. So, we see that thing kind of imprinting or whatever on whatever it's encountering, and that mystery's still there, and we know obviously the fight between that thing and Captain Atom's coming. And I'm excited to see that, and I was trying to see, okay, we got a shadowy figure, so anytime you see a shadowy figure, you're like, okay, is this connected to that? Who is that? Is it something else? I like, mysteries and builds, and that there's not just the single story going on. There's a build to multiple different things that may be and may not be interconnected. That's stuff that gets me excited about serialized storytelling in comics. All these different threads, it's, waiting to see where they converge, if they converge. I can't imagine a reader of Captain Atom not getting that, because there literally really is just a ton there going on. And it's one of the joys, I think, of the book. General Eiling being introduced at the end, wondering what he's like now. Because him, I do remember. He's responsible for the creation of Major Force as well. So this is a character who I at least know who he is from the past history. And if he seems like he's above board, he's not going to be. There's going to be.
The General is one of my favorite characters. To me, I could totally see myself in the decisions. I mean, maybe not the language, like how he specifically says stuff, but I could, if I were in the military in charge of doing what he does, I could identify with what he's going through, and in the subsequent issues and stuff. So, to me, he's not, let me see. I saw an online, somebody pointed out to me, somebody tweeted to me a review of Captain Atom that said that, basically they loved the series, but then they added this little elbow jab in where it was on page 20, Eileen comes out of the shadows, and by his stance or something, he might as well be twirling his, like what you were saying earlier, like his evil mustache or something. In effect, they were saying it's clear he's going to be a villain. And I mean, he will be seen in opposition of Captain Atom for sure. So, but to me, he's not a villain at all. To me, I think his logic process makes a lot of sense. So anyway, the reason I point that out is because you can't always say that about comic book villains, in quotes. Usually there's a lot of times that it just seems like they're doing the Dr. Evil thing. Like, I'm going to do these things because I'm an evil guy, and I don't think that's the case with, Eileen or whatever. So.
Well, one of the things that it's clear that's going to be explored, because Renita's really the one that builds the tone and feel for Eiling's first appearance there. When she's telling him, I was hoping you could read my mind and know that what was going on here, this guy was here, and that type of thing. I think, it's very interesting. First of all, I'm not anti-military or anti-scientists or anything like that. It's the opposite. I respect both parties, and the fact that sometimes the concerns of both blend very well together. But also the concerns of both sometimes wind up being in direct conflict, which is why you can have a character like Renita who's saying, his being here is not a good thing, because she's thinking of scientific concerns, where he's there thinking of military concerns, and knowing what he might be doing and what direction he might be going in might ethically go against her direction because of their chosen life paths. And I find that stuff interesting because, like you said, is it really that he's a hero or a villain? Is it really that she's a hero or a villain? Or is there a gray area based on their philosophies and life paths? I'm into that kind of stuff. That's where a book gets interesting, because it's not just one kind of character. It's not just one perspective. It's a number of different ideas that you can see blending together when they naturally would, and being, like sandpaper when they don't. And you feel that vibe right from the introduction. And that adds a little shakeup to something that already was very messy with Captain Atom.
Right. It's an interesting, you always want to get your characters in a place where each of them is right. Each of them is making the correct decision or for their motivation or their decisions. And then exploring the conflict that arises from that. So they have different worldviews, so what they think is right and what they're pushing for makes sense within that character, but it puts them in opposition. So that's where you get good, interesting, organic conflict.
Some of the coolest Lex Luthor stories have been where Lex is actually thinking he's doing what's right for humanity. And
Right.
what his definition of right and what is the appropriate or necessary measures that have to go through is completely different than other people, and that's where you get those where a person is doing something wrong, but they're doing it for the right reasons, and it's how they look at it and how they approach it. And those are the best villain and or opposition to a superhero when you have that type of force against them.
Yeah, and actually Lex Luthor is a great character to look at because you also have seen him dealt with very simplistically, especially early on when he was first introduced, as just Luthor and as just a mad scientist and that sort of thing. And he did the typical two-dimensional sort of the villain laugh and, I'm doing this because I'm a mad scientist, basically, versus what he has evolved into. And if you're listening, in quotes, I guess you would be reading, but reading his point of view, there would be points where you'd go, he's got a point. I don't necessarily agree with what conclusion he's coming from, but I see at least how he got there. So that makes him, in quotes, in the right, and then it makes Superman in the right, and then it's cool to see what happens from there,
I love that this has kind of become cyclical now, because Lex Luthor would have never become the man that he was if he hadn't gone through the Freddie Williams evil laugh therapy.
Right. Yeah, you can see him like calling up his other evil friends saying, dude, you've got to do this. All that planning in the dark, dank basements for your evil plans, that's what makes sense why you have to gloat, because it was so stressful just to get to that point that, you need that release. There's all that tension built up. You have to have that good laugh before you pull the switch that's supposed to kill the hero. It just happens to give them an opportunity to leave or to escape trap, but good in theory, I guess.
One of my favorite things about Lex, though, in modern Lex, has been that you get into that debate with Lex. I like that with Lex. At the end result, even though I disagree with him because I'm behind Superman and Superman's philosophy I can high five. I love when Lex is so well developed that you can follow the logic of why he believes he's right, even when you know that you disagree with him. Like, that to me adds a layer of whether you see a character of a hero, a villain, or a gray area, and you feel that way. It's more powerful when all those sides are so thoroughly and well developed that you can feel like, I get why this character does this. I get why they believe that they're in the right, even when they're not. That's interesting to me.
Whether General Eiling's viewpoint or worldview is as well developed as what you're discussing here is yet to be seen, and it's up to you guys, you and any other reader to decide. But that to me is what makes that character, because I'm convinced that his motivations are three-dimensional, that they make sense from his perspective. What he's been tasked to do by the government would lead him down this path logically for the the events in the next several issues. So hopefully people will stay tuned, so to speak.
And you know what? I like that every comic character, they don't have to feel like they're developed to the same fullness or the same path, because not every human's worldview is developed to that same extent. I think there's a reality to that as well. So like I'm anxious to follow Eiling's journey to see, does it get that well developed, or is his conviction not as strong as we think it's going to be? Those are questions I like having answered along the way. That's part of the fun of reading a series, is seeing this character where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm surprised at how much depth he has. Or the other end saying, I'm surprised how shallow that person is. Or there's somewhere in between. I think you need those different characters that fall into those different places in a variety of different books, because it adds kind of this sense of, this is the real world that we're reading about. As real as any fictional world can be, whether that's television, film, comics, novels, whatever. You need the characters in various different places, because that's the way the world really is.
Yes, yeah, you definitely need a variety, and that's actually something that as a writer, I haven't written a lot of stuff, but that's something I'm trying to develop, come to grips with, because I tend to, when I'm writing, many of the characters tend to start having my own voice and not enough facets of my voice. So meaning that they all start to think too much alike, and that wouldn't be very interesting if everyone in the if everyone in the story basically thought the same. You know, you want to develop those characters more. So anyway, that's just a exercise that I have to kind of, and that's actually something working with JT, collaborating as much as we have, has helped to show me his approach to it.
And just be careful when you start looking for those other inner voices, what they start saying to you, because the voices inside my head sometimes just, I gotta ignore them because they're not saying nice things.
Right. Yeah, the things they are urging you to do, you need to be mindful of that. Yeah, I remember, on a side note, I remember when I was working at Hallmark, like the couple weeks before I left Hallmark to do the full-time DC thing, I was staying late to work on something, and when I read, I don't know if it's like this for everyone, but when I read, I'm reading out loud in my own mind, so it's, of course, quiet to everyone else, but to me, I can hear my own voice speaking, and I'm reading in a cadence and stuff. It's hard to describe. I'm assuming it's like that with everyone, but I don't know. And there was somebody else who was staying late. This was like past 6 o'clock, and I heard her talking, and I knew she was talking to me, but it was like I had to finish this thought. And so I turned to her and I said, "Can you repeat that because my own inner voice drowned you out?" Or I can't remember exactly what I said, but she was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you said that because I did the same thing." But she was she was probably like 20 years older than me, something like that, maybe 15 years or whatever. But she was like, "I've never told anyone that before because I thought they would think I was strange." I don't know. To me, that was very funny because I can imagine her trying to always keep that inside, that she didn't want to tell people she had her own inner monologue or her own inner voice. That to me, it's like my voice of thought and my voice of reading, all that sort of stuff. So.
Oh yeah, I definitely 100% do that, and I've had times when I've meant to use my inner mind voice and I'm actually speaking out loud. So I'll be looking at somebody talking to myself. So they're thinking I'm talking to them. Like, what? I'm like, oh, sorry, I meant to use my inner voice. Sorry about that. And I've done that on multiple occasions.
We've gotten some great podcasting out of that.
That's great. I'm really happy that hasn't happened to me, because oftentimes my inner monologue is quite snarky. So I wouldn't want to. That might be bad in a public setting.
That's funny.
That moment where you go, "Oops, I said that out loud, didn't I?" Don't.
Yeah. To me, what makes Captain Atom, the series, interesting is seeing what happens when a human being gets promoted, in quotes, promoted to the level of a god, little g, and to see how that person redefines their own moral compass, what their motivations are, because in my opinion, if any of us, or if I were promoted in that same way, a lot of the psychological boxes that we use to define ourselves, it would be justified to start questioning each of those compartments. And I think I probably would find a lot of those notions outmoded. I would feel like they were no longer relevant. That to me is a very rich environment to derive stories from. If that sounds interesting, and it's not all heady stuff like that. There's just fun stuff, there's neat stuff, there's hopefully cool looking stuff, whatever that's in the book, but it's a sci-fi superhero philosophical story, and there's not a whole lot of those, and maybe the audience for that is not as big as the mainstream audience, but it's finally the type of book that I feel like we can say stuff that is, can be relevant to the real world and that sort of thing, other than just some neat sort of wacky adventures that happen to some guys with powers or something. So it's something that feels that we've definitely put a lot of work into, that it embodies a lot of themes and thoughts that both JT and I have been developing, of course, independently of each other until recently, since we were children, basically, and then we're finally getting the chance to put it in here. So I guess that's all stuff that we've said before, but it's fun and interesting to me. And also there's some of the research, or some of what I'm trying to keep in mind when drawing Captain Atom, is religious iconography. There were some people, in a similar discussion to this at a convention, some people were asking me my political and religious feelings, and that is completely not public. There's no reason I need to discuss that in public, basically, but those are all private things. The stuff I'm about to say about Captain Atom, whether that reflects my opinions or not, is not the issue. But I think that if you were at that power level, it would be easy to subconsciously or consciously start to fill the shoes of deities that you are used to, either in actual religious beliefs or mythology or anything like that. So what I mean is, if Nathaniel Adam was really into Greek mythology when he was a kid, and now he has all these powers, if he would then start to reflect some of those same themes, maybe on a subconscious level. To me, that's a really interesting idea, I guess. Or the religious iconography that he would see, whether he went to church or not, I don't know. But as you're exposed to different cultures and, different holidays, different people's houses, you will see paintings on their walls or photos or something, and those all would, in my opinion, start to feed into his subconscious, and they would start to manifest now that he has that power level. So anyway, I'm not real heavy into it, but I've read philosophy books and books about a variety of religions, and all of that to me are also themes that are not often touched on in comics, because you don't want to exclude anyone. And we have a fine line that we're walking back and forth here, but all that stuff is interesting and compelling, and to me it's relevant to entertainment and to the psychology of people and all that stuff. It's why they make their decisions sometimes, and sometimes they make it in spite of those philosophical religious beliefs, and it's relevant to me, and it's also what we're trying to put into the comic in ways that are still entertaining, that's not just reading some textbook that's bland,
Well, I think when you do stuff like that, because Superman's a character that often gets like a lot of religious iconography, or however you want to term it, attributed to him or attached to him. And sometimes it's intentional, other times it's not intentional. But I think, to me, my favorite literature, my favorite films, my favorite TV shows, comics, games, role-playing, video games, all kinds of stuff like that, are the ones where certain things are laid out for you, and then you can yourself, based on your own experiences, attach meaning to it. You mentioned that I don't need to know your religious beliefs to connect religiously and make religious connections with a character like Captain Atom. I can do that on my own because my own experiences influence my reading. So I love when those type of elements are explored, and in a way where it can be open. You recognize that this character has their own background and that's influencing them, but then I can add my own background and my own beliefs into it and connect with that book in my own way. That's fun for me. I think that there's, no matter what your backgrounds are, you can connect with characters like that and explore those things. And anyway, let's go on the end. What if you don't have religious beliefs? I think you can then connect with that book from that avenue as well. I don't think there's one way to connect with it. And I love that kind of stuff. I think that's a sign of really interesting literature when you can do that.
Yeah, where there's multiple layers, but you don't have to subscribe to a specific worldview or theology to appreciate and identify with the entertainment that's laid out there. So, because there's a way to, hopefully, to layer those subject matters into a story creatively and in a way that's fun, but not like hit someone over the head with them. Some of the imagery that I'm using, sometimes I hope it's subtle and other times it's not as subtle, but I'm trying to basically communicate those things subconsciously even to the reader, whether they care about it or if they identify with it, so be it, whatever. But putting it out there, and hopefully other people can appreciate and identify with it. And if they can't, hopefully they can still identify with it on the surface level. But it's like, I'm trying to think of the phrase now, but it's basically embedding, it's like embedding subconscious or subliminal imagery into artwork and film and that sort of thing, and I'm not real deep into it yet, but that sort of thing, it makes it interesting for me while I'm drawing it. It gives me something to think about, and it's yet another way to try to communicate those same ideas and stuff. So those are things that I've always found interesting, but it's new to me to be able to implement those into a comic book. Like normally it's just like this guy punches another guy in the face, and that's what a lot of comic books are, and that still can be enjoyable. I enjoy watching boxing sometimes, so you don't necessarily have to have all those multiple layers, but this is a book that to me is perfect for those sort of multiple layers.
And leading to some really interesting comic shop debates from people who have two different worldviews.
Yeah, hopefully they'll stay civil. It's been my experience that doesn't often happen. I remember within my first week of working for Hallmark, somebody in the next training room over brought up religion and some very hot-button topics within the subheading of religion, and that was a really bad idea, in my opinion. I mean, it still stayed pretty civil, but you could hear people's voices becoming escalated, and finally the trainer came back in the room and things died down. But I just thought, what a bad idea that was to bring up in that setting.
One of the things I'm liking, just speaking about the new DCU in general and the direction it's going in, there's been a lot of talk about diversity. One of the things when it comes to diversity that I'm really liking is that there's not that I felt that there was before, but there isn't a cookie cutter nature to the titles. Every title creatively, you're seeing Captain Atom has a feel and a look and a presence to it that no other title in the DCU has. The same thing can be said, you mentioned Francis Manapul and The Flash. The Flash has its own different look and feel and things like that. You get a very different experience when you jump between those two books. Then you go on to Justice League. And the reason why I'm even mentioning these, you're talking about the character The Flash. 3 different appearances for the character The Flash. 3 different sensibilities, 3 different creative purposes, yet it still feels like the same guy in the same world. Then you can go to an all-star Western, and you're getting like a way different presence. And Captain Atom's one of those books that, what am I really loving about it right now? It doesn't feel like anything else that I'm currently reading across comics. It's fresh, it's different, it's exciting. I feel like that there's a place that only Captain Atom can be in. I was a big fan of the book Starman when it was out by James Robinson. And one of the things that I really loved about that, when that book was out month in, month out, it felt like nothing else that was out there. He's got his own world. Starman had guest appearances by heroes from time to time, yet it always felt like they were coming into his world versus his world was being changed by them, if that makes sense. And I felt like that with The Flash. It felt like it was Barry. He was totally that same character, yet he was coming into Captain Atom's world, not the other way around. And I think that's important when you're developing an identity for a book. This book has that kind of feel for me. So it's really important to me as well, and it's one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on. We talked about issue 2, and I wanted to go back to this book again because, it's always fun to talk with a creator about, the whole process of this book, and there's something special about this title that I'm really enjoying. Jim and I were big fans of the book The Shield that DC did as well, and there's another book where visually and storytelling-wise I felt it was very unique. And there's a lot of titles that, you don't want to get lost in the shuffle, and this is one of those that I'm passionate about, that I want to see people give a shot. Especially it's so easy now to get these titles. If you didn't get any of the issues, you can go to your comic shop and grab them. There's a lot of reordering being done on all of these titles. But then also, digitally, if you go into comic shop and you pick up issue 4, for example, or issue 3, the current issue we're talking about, and if you can't find 1 and 2, you can go to the app and you can have it the same day, right then and there, read the story and be up to speed with everybody else instantly. This is something that we haven't had before, where it's really that accessibility now to jump on a title. There's really no reason to not pick up an issue and say, okay, I'm going to pick up issue 3, I'm going to page through it. If it's for me, I'm going to go back and get 1 and 2, and nobody can say I can't be on board. I like that. There's a convenience there.
First of all, thank you for the positive stuff about the unique feel and stuff of it. I've gotten several tweets and emails that said that they were interested in the book and that their local comic shop had not ordered enough copies, so they paid for the digital download of it. And that is great, because I personally have been on the consuming, as a consumer, I have gone into a comic shop, the product I wanted was not there, and then I kind of forgot about it for months, and then somebody reminded me of it, and I was like, oh yeah, that book. That can spell, if that happens enough, actually, that can spell cancellation for a book, where if it's not enough on the radar, or if the comic shop just happened to not order enough copies because they didn't know enough about it, and that's actually the case with Captain Atom is actually doing pretty good on numbers and stuff. But I think the first issue, especially, people didn't know really what to expect, and if it would just be a rehashing of a guy who flies around and shoots energy blast, and what's the point, kind of, that can be too generic. But with the day and date digital stuff, that to me is an awesome advantage to have. Whether it's at the correct price point or not is, up for debate. But to be able to basically go, oh, I really like that comic that I just heard or read a tweet about, and then, or, listen to Raging Bullets about, and then, still on your computer screen or on your iPad, mobile device, you go to Comixology or whatever, and you're able to get it right then. You don't even have to leave your house. You don't even have to get dressed. You don't even have to get up off the toilet. You can just get the comic just like that. That's an awesome advantage. So,
for anybody out there who didn't get issue 1 and 2, for example, those are already $1 cheaper because after 30 days on Comixology, they all drop down $1. If you went to your comic shop, you grabbed a current issue or something like that, and you aren't able to get all of the issues, but you want to read it right away. And even as a collector, if you're like, I want to seek out those issues and have them eventually from conventions and all that, but you're also a reader and you want to read them now, that's one of the nice things is older issues are automatically less expensive than they were when they originally came out after 30 days. So there is that option for anybody out there listening to this. It's like, I'd like to try Captain Atom. You can try issue 1 for $1.99 right from the app. And I know our sponsor, DCB Service, has a link right on their site to Comixology where they get credit for it if you do the purchases. And let your retailers know that. That you're purchasing this title that, you're like, hey, you didn't have issue 1 and 2, or you were out of an issue and I'm picking up that book. It lets them know that you want them to order more copies. Because a lot of retailers, they're working on a limited budget, and they need to know, hey, there's a certain amount of sell-through I'm going to get on my book. And, letting people know that, hey, this is multiple issues in, but I'm jumping on late. I'm really digging this book. Can you start getting issues into the store? Nowadays, more and more retailers are relying on pre-order numbers, pull lists, things like that to drive decision-making on having how many extra copies that they have that are for the shelf purposes. So really let your retailers know that you're digging a book, you're pulling it, and it lets them know purchase-wise for that guy who walks in off the street. Like yourself, if you're jumping on a book late, to have a couple extra copies.
Well said.
Freddie, as always, I want to thank you, as always, for the amount of time you've given us and for coming on the show. You're always a terrific guest. I'm a big fan of your work. We have been since Robin, which is how we initially met you. I do want to say, again, it's one of the reasons why I'm such a fan is because every new title you go on is the fact that adaptability that we talked about earlier, that every new title has a new feel, a new theme. There's something that is always there at its core that I love about your artwork, but there's nothing cookie cutter about it. It's modified and changed, and you try new things based on the new experience. And as fans, that's wonderful for me because I appreciate the artistic nature of comics and that there's, every book feels different. It feels fresh, and I'm wowed. I've been reading comics since the 70s. So for me to continue to be wowed at this point, it's really because of the creative juices that flow through this industry. So this kind of stuff is something for me as a fan I really appreciate. So I just want to thank you for the time you've given us, for the work you do in comics, and just for keeping it exciting.
Thank you for having me on the show, and those were very nice things that you just said, and creative risk to do that because the risk is that I would alienate the people who followed me from the previous title and who were expecting more of that same thing, and then they see this very different feel. So it is a risk, but hopefully it comes out in a positive way, something that they can enjoy and that it helps to establish the mood of the new book. So thank you for the kind words, and I hope other people dig on it as well.
I'm going to need something to wear in a very big truck.
Sure. Anything else?
I'll need some guys. Not these guys, because, well, they're kind of dead.
I want to remind everyone, our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, I want to remind everyone that they are a Comixology DC Comics digital partner. You earn 5% towards your DCB Service order by going to their site and using that. So please make sure if you're buying digital, please support our show sponsor. It's a great way to earn credit towards your DCB Service order, and it's a great way to enjoy those digital comics as well, such as Captain Atom, which we're talking about in this episode. Also, remember to pick up Captain Atom number 6 if you haven't been. $2.99 regularly, 40% off, only $179. Plus, if you're doing that 50% off deal where you're getting the complete DC line for 50% off, you're going to pick up that book as well. So I want to thank DCBService.com for giving those amazing discounts. A great way to pick up comics at a great price. Over at InStockTrades.com, remember, Robin the Big Leagues trade paperback, $12.99 regularly, 42% off, only $7.53. There's other books by Freddie E. Williams II on there, including his Flash run, also books from JSA All-Stars, so definitely pick up Freddie E. Williams II's work if you haven't been checking it out already. Terrific artist. I want to once again thank Freddie for joining us on the show. This was a wonderful episode for us. We always enjoy his company. He's a terrific artist, somebody I'm just a huge fan of, and it was great to have the opportunity to talk about this book because it's really a different take. It's a great cutting-edge book. I've never read Captain Atom. This is a great opportunity for me to explore this character. And it's funny how when a creative team comes on a book and I start reading the book monthly, if they're really good and doing a great job at delivering the concept, it makes me want to go back and see kind of the genesis of it. And I want to go back and read some of the Ditko stuff and see what this character was like in the past. Because it's not a character, I agreed with a lot of what Freddie was saying. I had a certain impression about Captain Atom coming in, and now that I'm getting to explore the character and seeing how cool the concept is, I want to know more. So this is one of those episodes. I hope that you guys got that vibe out of it as well if you're not already reading Captain Atom, or if you've been reading the book. This is a book like you're kind of connecting with Captain Atom in a new way as well. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to have listener voicemails. I planned on having them on this show, but because I had some technical issues behind the scenes, I didn't want to risk any more time delay on the episode. So I'm saving the voicemails for next week because I want to have Jim on for the recording. We're also going to continue our exploration with the New 52. We're going to be exploring for sure Justice League International. We're also going to take a look at some of the mini-series that have been released for the New 52 because we're not going to ignore those. For sure, we're going to be touching on the Penguin, books like Huntress, and I don't know what else we're going to get to on that episode. We're going to talk about at least 4 books and possibly more. But there's been some great miniseries coming out that I definitely want to start talking about with the New 52. So we will see you next week.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Fated for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just cough